all of reality gets blinked out and brought back like that in Marvel Comics. What's going on, guys? This is Rob, and we are back with G.O.D.S. Now, if you guys recall the last video that we did, and as always, if you need to get caught up, you'll find a playlist at the end of this video. Basically, Oblivion made his move. Now, as we talked about, right, Oblivion is the cosmic entity that represents the absence of anything. So when everything and anything ceases to exist, Oblivion will remain. Otherwise, what would be his purpose, right? Like, I represent the color yellow, except for when you need the color yellow. So it's one of those things, right? Like, his character is on that level. He will outlive every concept in existence in Marvel Comics. Now, when he made the move, right, at the end of the last video, the greatest reveal that he ever did, right? Like, I am Oblivion and my time is now. It was amazing, right? So Stephen Strange does the only thing he can do, because the reality here is that if this was done, right, like, it would have been the end of all things. Like, Oblivion can wipe out a whole universe, potentially even the multiverse, since he's kind of a cosmic abstract on that level, right? What we get is effectively a time slip. Now, here's a cool thing, right? The way this is represented is cool because there's two stories being told at the same time, and we'll tell the other story here in a second because they dovetail together, and that's where the comic ends, right? You have Wynn who says, Steven, you have to do something, right? The response of Steven, I'm on it, sliding backward as they step forward, right? Wynn makes his move, right? He goes to step up to this guy, right? The person who was holding the Oblivion Stone, the artifact that Oblivion used to wipe out all of creation, right? Then it replays again, right? Steven, you have to do something, on it, sliding backward as they slow down, right? The process repeats itself yet again. Steven, you have to do something, on it, sliding backward as they stand still. And so there's like three different attempts basically to try to like slow things down. It's Steven manipulating time, right? Because one of the things to know is that this whole sequence between Steven and Wynn, Steven slowing down time, it's happening in milliseconds, right? It's happening in just fractions, right? It's just so incredibly fast that what it does is it gives Wynn the opportunity to make his move to hit this guy that was holding the Oblivion Stone before it can be given to the cosmic entity Oblivion and all of creation can be wiped out and the day is saved. Now, who is this guy? Okay, this is where the story gets cool. So what we do here is that while all this is happening, right, Oblivion is kind of seeing everything and kind of telling us the story about how all of this came to a head, how we got to this particular moment where he had the stone in his hand and was on the cusp of blinking out all of creation. What we do is pick up with a kid named Robert, and Robert is met by this guy who says, it's time, are you ready? And of course he says, you know, I don't really know, I'm scared. And this guy kind of goes through this whole explanation process. He says, that's natural. Did you know that humans are the only mammals who, when they're born, are completely and utterly incapable of protecting themselves, both then and even years later? Even something that you would think is equally fragile, like a baby deer, is not so helpless as that. A fawn is actually born without a scent, so no predators can find them, but not you, right? And this kid's like, you know, definitely I don't smell. So he's obviously kind of preying on this young kid's kind of a naivety to a degree, right? And he says, yes, that's one way of looking at it. He says, you see, my hope is that eventually you will grow into something capable of defending yourself, someone able to make their own decisions, but that's not how you are now. And that's not how it starts. No, humans are not innately built for independence. That's why it's so important that you have a strong steward to protect you and teach you life's important lessons, like the difference between what is wrong and what is right. Understand. Now, the word in between is bolded there, which means it means something. What cosmic entity do we know of that stands between right and wrong, order and chaos, right? That's what's going on here. It's nuts, right? Because this kid's like, I don't think so. And this guy, right, he literally says, and what else do you say? And he says, thank you, right? And he says, you're welcome. So are you ready now? Do you trust me? And the kid's like, yes, I trust you. Then he says, then go ahead, climb inside. He presents this kid to a Skinner box, right? And it says, I promise you, it's safer in there. It's a better world, right? It's the Skinner box of the InBetweener. Now, here's the thing, right? I have no qualms admitting when I'm wrong. I 100% thought the Cubist core was the In-Betweener. One, because of how he looked, right? The In-Betweener is always split down the middle in terms of like opposing diametrics, right? Contrasting sides. The dude looked just like what you would expect the In-Betweener to look like if he was thrown into a Skinner box. And the reason why is because Skinner boxes are designed for the purpose to recondition a person. You can recondition them in virtually anything that you want. But with this kid, Robert, this is the crazy thing, right? We're told operant conditioning chambers are constructed to study animal behavior in response to stimuli. Inside of one, an animal is taught to perform certain actions, like pulling a lever, and in response, experience reward or punishment. These are commonly referred to as Skinner boxes, but Robert Forson knows it by a different name: the real world. From a young age, Robert was trained to be the greatest scientist of his generation. For 15 years, he was taught nothing outside of mathematics, physics, and engineering. In them, he saw the solutions to everything, and to everything, they were the solution. His lever was knowledge, and his stimulus was the sweet whispers of the In-Betweener's praise. Then we kind of jump forward, right? When he was 20, Robert Forson was released into the world, venturing out into the dream that we call reality. And that's one of the coolest things here, right? Because all this guy knows is literally the Skinner box, right? This, for those of you guys who have been able to pick up on it, it's the allegory of Plato's cave. But for those of you guys who don't know about the allegory of Plato's cave, imagine that you spent your whole life in a cave and you never really saw the real world. Instead, what you saw were projections or shadows of the real world on the cave wall, right? They're not real, but they're real to you. So if I were to take you out of that cave and I were to show you the world as it truly exists, you would reject it as incomprehensible. And that's where Robert Forson is, right? Robert Forson is in this place where to him, the cave is the real world and the real world is the false world. So it's just this really awesome, mind-blowing concept because it shows how easily a person can be reconditioned inside of a Skinner box. And so we're told during this time, he made no friends, made no social acquaintances, and found no love. He hadn't been created to solve those problems. He lacked the math for it. Robert was alone. He was shunned and he hated the world. And that's the interesting thing here. This guy is the result of what happens when you take a human being, you strip away their humanity, you replace it with what is in effect absolute analytics, and then let them out into the world. They lack the capacity to be social. They lack humanity. And so we're told to some, such people have a certain value attached to their ranks. In Robert, AIM found a perfect candidate and he was recruited to join them 2 years ago. But then we're told, as an organization, Advanced Idea Mechanics operates outside the morals of normal society and beyond the cowardice of ethical behavior, which is true. These guys initially started out with an attempt to kind of, control the world or take over the world through technological means, but they don't care about morality. They don't care about any kind of ethics or anything like that. They created a cosmic cube on a whim, right? A device with the ability to control the fundamental forces of all of creation. To them, those are impediments, right? As impediments to their role, to their goal, to the things that they want to be able to pull off. And so we're told, though he never uttered the words out loud, for he never spoke without being spoken to, Robert was directly delighted that he had found others that might be, quote unquote, like him. But this was not his world, only a dream. And in it, he learned that most of these scientists, while more gifted than most, simply hid their humanity a little better. They were all the same. This was just a different flavor of cruel. Still, the loss of the last bit of hope can crush anybody. And that night, he cried out for someone to save him. And that's the cool thing, because when that happens, the In-Betweener reappears. And what does the In-Betweener say, right? It simply appears and says, "Will you please me, child?" The response of Robert, yes. And he says, "Build me something wonderful." And so Robert did. The end of the dream, the end of everything. In effect, this guy built a device designed for the purpose of eradicating everything in existence. Because in his mind, all he's doing is destroying a dream, right? Get me out of this dream, get me away from this dream. And that was the whole motivation here. The whole motivation was to take a human being with potential, put them in a Skinner box, recondition them into believing that the real world is the false world, and then fill them with such a level of knowledge, send them out into the world to encounter all different types of people, so that over time they will feel isolated. They'll feel alone, more isolated and alone than they would have felt if they'd stayed in the Skinner box. And they desire more than anything else to destroy this nightmare in which they live. And so when given the opportunity, they construct a device designed for the purpose of killing this nightmare, killing the stream, and waking them up, all the while completely unaware of the fact that they're wiping out all of reality itself. So that's the cool thing here. Now, when that happens, right? Like when the day is quote unquote saved, right? Like you literally have Robert who's just like, I just want to wake up, right? Like I don't want to be in this stream anymore. So he really believes that what he's seeing and experiencing is not real. And that's when Doctor Strange and Wynn are kind of like, okay, so just like Cubit's core, this guy's been reconditioned, right? Like I think perhaps this has officially escalated into a situation, because now it's not just some proto mage out there, right? Just going on some crazy campaign trying to initiate a Babylon event, right? Some crazy situation. Now it's a pattern, right? Like that's what you're looking at here. Someone out there is trying to recondition people. Is it just the Inbetweener, or is there something else going on? Is the Inbetweener part of something much, much bigger? Now they don't really even know the full extension of the Inbetweener's involvement outside of the fact that the Skinner box seemingly belongs to him. But you basically have them come to this realization, there's something that we need to do, right? We need to kind of like pull at this thread, and we need to basically see what happens. Now, before they go, one of the things that's kind of funny here is like Oblivion shows back up again, because while they're talking and they're conversing, Oblivion's just been standing there watching it all happen. And he's like, I was promised something today by the universe. I could see it's coming in the stars. I could hear it, the sounds of a collapse, a symphony. I am God, and you took this from me. You have made an enemy this day, right? Because Oblivion's whole desire is to see the ending of everything. The response of Wynn, right? Like, yeah, well, get in line. And that's where Oblivion just lashes out, right? Just like immerses everybody in the full totality of its power. But Oblivion doesn't destroy them. Not only that, Oblivion doesn't destroy all of creation. If he really wanted to wipe everything out, why simply just wait? Why not just do it? And that's the question, right? That's the question here. What stops him from doing that? Oblivion is a cosmic abstract of the highest order. He's astronomically powerful. So why does he need to wait? Right? We don't know the answer to that question. And so you basically have Wynn who's just kind of told, look, man, like you run your mouth way too much. And one of these days it's going to come back to bite you. But you basically have Doctor Strange who says, there's a thread that we can pull. I know where we need to go. So they follow Robert Forson, right? This guy goes back home, back into a Skinner box. And he tells them, like, dreams are fleeting and hard to grasp. I probably won't remember you when I wake up, but if I do, I'll remember to be thankful, right? Again, it's so crazy listening to this guy talk and believes that everything he's seeing is a dream, but then also realizing how he got to this place, right? How he was conditioned to be this way. And so you have Strange and Wynn who are like, yes, it's another Skinner box. But then the question becomes, do we enter it? Do we go inside the Skinner box to see what's in there? Does the image change, right? If two people go into a Skinner box, do they both experience the same thing, right? Like that's the question. And it's kind of like, I mean, I've never really dared to go inside of a Skinner box. I mean, imagine me, Stephen Strange, the Sorcerer Supreme, being reconditioned by some cosmic entity out there and being used as a force for evil. I could let Dormammu into the main Marvel universe. I could do any number of things. God forbid, right, that I let Zom into the main Marvel universe, because then it's guaranteed death for everybody. No one can defeat Zom outside of like the living tribunal, maybe, right? I mean, he's just that powerful. But once they decide to actually venture in, since it's two of them that are there, they realize the Skinner box is bigger on the inside than it is on the outside. So it automatically defies all of space and time. Now, one of the things that I have wanted to point out here, and it's something that we had mentioned in the first video that we did on G.O.D.S, that when Cubit's core went back and got into the Skinner box, the speech bubbles were words that were written in blue. Now, if you notice, when Oblivion was talking and when the Inbetweener was talking, their words were written in red. Now, there's one cosmic being out there that I'm aware of whose speech bubbles and whose words always come in blue, and that is the Beyonder. So my initial thought was the Beyonder is somehow tied into this. And to what capacity, I don't entirely know. but it seems like it was. We know from our coverage of like the X-Men and the Enigma Dominion and all that kind of stuff that like the Beyonders are still alive and well, and they're still out there doing their thing, right? Like they didn't just disappear all of a sudden. They've been here this whole time. And so it's just kind of like, okay, like let's see how far this thing goes, right? We came in through that door, which is an entrance, but then there's that door, which is an exit. So what's on the other side of this Skinner box? And even when they ask Robert Forson, he's just like, I'm not supposed to go in there. So I simply just don't go in there. So they're like, okay, let's go through. And what happens is when they enter to the other side, they end up encountering Penrose steps. Not only that, the further along they get and the deeper they go, the more they realize there's more than one Skinner box. In fact, there's thousands of them, potentially even hundreds of thousands of Skinner boxes. And because we're dealing with cosmic entities, not just in the main Marvel universe, but across the entirety of the multiverse, the question has to be asked, how many people are in here and who's in there and who is doing all of this? Because it can't just be the In-Betweener. He is a mid-level cosmic abstract, right? Like there's something much bigger going on. So with that being said, guys, I want to know from you, who do you hope is behind all of this in the Marvel multiverse with regards to gods? But if you guys need to get caught up, make sure you click this link to the playlist and I will catch you all later. Peace.